Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan had received the report on Hariri's assassination probe from the head of the International Investigations Committee, Baâathist in New York. While the report cleared Syria of wrongdoing in Hariri's assassination, it implicated 4 generals and handed indictments against 19 others, including some Syrian officials. A few hours had passed since the report became public, and yet another crime unfolded. This time, the hand of betrayal had killed a prominent leader who had defended freedom and fought against oppressive and backward regimes. He is a journalist and a member of the Lebanese parliament, Mr. Tueni. He was a man of principle who wanted what is best for his people. While en route to his office at Al Nahar newspaper, he was ambushed and killed by a booby-trapped vehicle along the road of Al-Baâathist. According to Lebanese internal security forces, the roadside bomb exploded in an intersection near the area of Bet Meri, where the Mukallaf's town hall is and the member of parliament Tueni lives. The explosion completely destroyed Tueni's armored Range Rover and threw it down a nearby ravine, killing him and one of his companions. It is believed that there were other victims in the car because of the scattered flesh and body parts. The explosion shattered the booby-trapped car into small pieces. Tueni's wife, Siham, and a number of her friends arrived at the scene of the incident and watched as her husband's body was pulled out of the car and placed in an ambulance for the Red Cross. The Lebanese minister Marwan Hamidi, who is Tueni's uncle, arrived at the scene of the incident and took a first-hand look.
The explosion happened in this place, and I found Jubran's identification on the ground and handed it over to one of the police captains deployed at the crime scene. The identification was crumbled up, and I gave it to the captain.
According to security sources, the explosion also injured 32 people living in nearby areas as a result of being hit by shattered windows and fragments of the vehicle. It also damaged a number of the surrounding office buildings that house dozens of industrial corporations.
I was working in that building when I heard an explosion. The window was shattered and I was hit by some glass fragments. I do not know what caused the explosion.
As I was walking with my friends, we heard a big explosion. We saw lots of smoke from the burnt vehicles. We carried an injured person and put him in the ambulance. There was a dark cloud of smoke covering the area, and there was shattered glass everywhere. Soon afterwards, units of the Lebanese police and army were deployed to the scene and sealed off the area. The car was thrown all the way down the ravine.
Several fire engines rushed to the scene and put out the fire that completely destroyed 10 cars and partially damaged a number of others. According to local residents, Mr. Tueni had always used this route on his way to work using his armored Range Rover. It was also used by the international investigator Detlef Mehlis on his way to Monteverde. The General Chief of the Lebanese National Security, Ashraf Reiki, and the District Attorney, Saeed Mirza, and the State Attorney of the Military Court, Leah Zaid, arrived at the scene of the incident after the Lebanese security forces secured and sealed off the area. A number of homicide investigators also arrived at the crime scene to collect evidence. The assassination of Jubran Tueni came after he had received many threats that were the subject of discussions and debates among politicians and news media outlets. These threats forced him to immigrate to France, but returned to Lebanon after the security situation had improved in the country.
Syrian officials rejected the claim made by Member of Parliament Walid Junblat against Syria, accusing Syria for the assassination of Member of Parliament Jibran Tueni. In a television interview, Syrian President Bashar Assad said that imposing sanctions on Syria will cause instability in the region. An official news source confirmed that Syria condemns the assassination of Tueni and said that whoever accuses Syria of this crime intensifies the tensions between Syria and Lebanon. The accusations against Syria Syria and President Bashar Assad were out of the ordinary. As Member of Parliament Walid Junblat accused President Assad of involvement in the assassination of the anti-Syrian Member of Parliament Tueni, angering Syrian officials who accused Israel of being behind the crime. They explained to Walid Junblat that they are extremely displeased by his rushed statements, especially because they came so soon after the incident.
We stressed to Walid Junblat, who, when he used to face problems and not find any way out, internally or externally, used to come to Syria. Syria has now closed the door, and the door will remain shut. Let Walid Junblat do as he wishes.
An official news source responded saying that accusations against Syria for any assassinations in Lebanon will hinder relations between the two countries, adding that whoever accuses Syria is helping the criminals who are bombing in Lebanon, according to the same source.
By carrying out these operations, they want to strengthen their position after the rug had been pulled from underneath their feet. We firmly believe that the real killer is in the Lebanese lands, whether he is tied to Israel or whether he is part of another group targeting Syria.
The Syrian condemnation did not stop accusations from being made against it. These accusations say that Syria is behind the assassinations that have targeted anti-Syrian Lebanese journalists and politicians. However, Damascus continues to confirm that it does not use methods that could only serve Syria's enemies, according to Syrian officials. The accusation by Syria's enemies of her involvement in the assassination of Lebanese opposition politician Tueni has reached new political heights. The Syrian response came strong and clear, saying that Damascus's doors will remain closed to those Lebanese who accuse it of this crime.
The latest development indicate a crisis in the Syrian-Lebanese relations. Official Syrian sources accuse some Lebanese to be involved in smuggling weapons into Syria. The official Syrian television mentioned that the initial investigations of the confrontations that took place in the Idlib region yesterday confirmed that some Lebanese were involved, but refrained from naming them. Confrontations between Syrian authorities and armed groups, which the government describes as part of the Takfiri group, are increasing after the fighting that took place last Sunday in the city of Aleppo and the latest confrontations that took place in Idlib province in the city of Kfar Doma. Analysts say that armed groups are planning to carry out missions on Syrian lands, especially after the tightened control over the Syrian-Iraqi borders and the tightened patrol over the Lebanese borders. Knowledgeable sources say that it is possible that the way the Syrian security forces are dealing with the armed groups will affect Syria's relations with Washington and convince it that Syria is serious in dealing with armed Islamic groups. This comes as Washington's political pressure on Damascus is easing.
I believe that these are isolated events carried out by individuals who might be preparing to carry out operations in Iraq. I do not think that any of these storehouses were going to be used for Syria in the future.
Official sources believe that thousands of Syrians infiltrate or attempt to infiltrate Iraq to kill the Americans there. However, political analysts in Damascus say that the government will deal with these armed groups firmly and severely. Knowledgeable sources confirmed that helicopters have bombarded the confrontations site in Kfar Doma, and the Syrian official television showed the pictures of the confrontations.
When the news was first reported yesterday morning around 11, I talked to more than one person in the area and more than one doctor who was supposed to examine the bodies, and they all confirmed that there were helicopters that bombarded the area where the confrontations took place. The area was densely populated and was close to the Hamadiyya village located in the Marat Nu'man and was on the main road, which made it a convenient place as a rest area for these armed groups, leading to the involvement of the helicopter.
It is worth mentioning that an organization named the Jund al-Sham, which seeks to create an Islamic State in Syria, is accused of being behind these recent confrontations. The consecutive confrontations and confiscations of weapons causes one to question the movement of these groups and the sources of their financing. These confrontations are not confined to the Syrian capital and its suburbs, and the analysts do not doubt that the winter will bring bloody confrontations with the armed groups, and the government acknowledges the existence of plans targeting officials and government buildings. The National Supreme Committee for Rooting Out the Baathists called on Iraqi voters not to vote for any lists that include the names of former officials from the dismantled Ba'ath Party in the parliamentary elections next Thursday. The committee clarified the names of 130 former Baathists that are included in different election lists and urged all Iraqis to vote for the implementation of Rooting Out the Ba'athist law in respect for the blood of the martyrs and the victims of mass graves. The committee also revealed a list of 80 parties that included former Ba'ath officials, most importantly, the National Iraqi List headed by the former Prime Minister Iyad Allawi and the Iraqi Reconciliation Front. At the time when the holy city of Najaf prepares for the upcoming legislative elections by taking strict security measures and increasing campaign ads, the religious leader Ayatollah Ali Sistani stressed the importance of participation by all Iraqi sects in the elections. The city of Najaf is taking unprecedented measures in preparation for the upcoming parliamentary elections. Election slates intensified the campaign ads for their candidates, as is apparent on the city's walls, which are covered with ads, as is also apparent in the posters for the platform ads of these groups. Some of these groups use religious slogans as a way to gain parliamentary seats.
I personally do not have any relations with this person whose name was mentioned on one of the Iraqi lists for the parliamentary elections, and I also do not have any relations with this list.
The religious authority, Ali Sistani, stressed the importance of the elections, as well as the importance of voting for those who protect the country's fundamental principles and national interests. He also stressed the need of not dispersing votes by voting for multiple small parties. This was perceived with interest on the streets of Najaf.
Ordinary residents from Najaf respect the view of the religious authority, Ali Sistani, and consider him the spiritual father of the Iraqi people.
Despite the relative calmness in the city of Najaf, the streets witnessed notable security measures and an intensified presence of police and National Guards at the city's entrances, especially after the government announced its security plan for the elections. Some political observers believe that the religious factor may determine how successful some lists are in comparison to others.
Egyptians wrapped up the last phase of legislative elections amidst a state of violence, especially in the municipalities of the Egyptian Nile Delta. Meanwhile, the number of casualties rose to 8 dead and at least 130 others injured as a result of the police crackdown on voters in an attempt to prevent them from casting their ballots. 9 Egyptian municipalities witnessed a bloody day of voting in the second round of the third phase of elections. After 6 months of claiming that they are committed to democracy and political reforms, the Egyptian authorities adhered to their old anti-democratic practices. As voters arrived in large numbers to cast their ballots, the police tried to prevent them from entering polling stations, killing and injuring some voters. In an image similar to that of a war zone, the police clashed with voters, firing tear gas and rubber bullets at Muslim Brotherhood supporters.
I arrived here at 8 a.m. and now it's 2 p.m. and I've not yet entered the polling station to cast my ballot. The security forces are completely clamping down on voting centers. Where's the democracy that they are talking about?
The voters voiced their disappointment and accused the ruling party of standing behind these violations.
The ruling National Democratic Party should have appointed parliament officials to spare us all these problems. What is the point of holding elections if they are undemocratic, fraudulent, and unfair?
In order to reach polling stations and to escape police harassment and intimidation, voters climbed walls and used ladders. The police had arrested many voters who tried to cast their ballots in favor of opposition groups. We want democratic and fair elections, meaning the government should allow people to vote freely with no manipulation.
Al-Alam TV crew toured the municipality of the Egyptian Delta and took notes of some of the violations committed by police against the voters, press, and civil society organizations. Human rights organizations cautioned people of the impact of such violations in the future of democracy in Egypt.
The Organization of Civil Society detected a number of election violations in the municipality of the Delta, such as Al-Dakhiliya and Dimyat. Many voters were turned back and prevented from casting their ballots. The police intimidated and clashed with voters, which resulted in a number of casualties. I personally saw many victims of police brutalities in hospitals. Human rights activists also reported detecting many election violations.
من داخل مدن دلتا مصر أحمد السيوفي العالم.
In the name of God, the compassionate and the merciful. Hello and thanks for joining us for this edition of Jeddah News, brought to you live from the Iranian capital, Tehran. I'm Din Mohammadi. Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad says the Palestine issue concerns the whole world of Islam. President Ahmadinejad made the remark on Monday in a meeting with the leader of the Palestinian Hamas group, Khaled Mash'al, in Tehran, and underlined the need for unity among Palestinians and called on all resistance groups to develop balance and unity among themselves. Mash'al in turn hailed Iran's stance vis-a-vis the Zionist regime, as well as efforts to serve the Islamic states and the world of Islam. Iran's visiting Parliament Speaker Ghulam Ali Haddad Adel, currently in Moscow for an official 3-day visit, held talks on Monday with Chairman of the Russian Duma, Boris Gryzlov, where the pair stressed enhancement of mutual interparliamentary cooperation. At the meeting, Gryzlov said setting up of Iran-Russia Economic Joint Commission in the coming year will set the stage for more long-term cooperation agreements to be sealed by the two states to boost joint investment. Duma chairman went on to say Iran's presence in Shanghai Organization meetings as an observer has opened a new chapter in Tehran-Moscow cooperation in various arenas, including fight against terrorism and drug trafficking in particular. Senior Iranian army officials dismissed the speculations that technical problem has been the reason behind the army plane crash catastrophe, which claimed 108 lives in southern Tehran last week. This was announced Monday when the Parliament's National Security Commission convened a joint session with the Defense Minister, Deputy Joint Chief of Staff of the Army, and Commander of the Air Force on Monday to discuss the reasons behind the C-130 plane crash. Following the meeting, the National Security Commission's rapporteur, Kazem Jalali, said the 5-hour delay before the takeoff of the ill-fated plane had been due to poor visibility caused by air pollution, and the flight was allowed as soon as a minimum visibility distance of 1,400 meters was secured.
Another high-profile assassination in Lebanon. A powerful car bomb killed Tueni, an outspoken anti-Syrian journalist and a member of parliament. Lebanese officials wasted no time in pointing the finger at Damascus. Yochanan El-Ram has more on the story.
The massive car bomb exploded as the motorcade of Tueni, a Christian lawmaker and newspaper publisher, drove through a Beirut suburb. Tueni's driver and 2 others also died in the blast, and 10 people were injured. The 48-year-old Tueni, a staunch opponent of Syria, spent much of his time abroad after he received what he called accurate information in August that he was on an assassination hit list. He returned from Paris only yesterday. The political leader of the Druze community, Walid Jumblat, blamed the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad for the murder, a belief shared by other Lebanese.
Any doubts that Bashar al-Assad and his band of organized crime criminals are behind all this list of crimes.
Today's attack came one day after Chief UN investigator Detlef Meles delivered his final report on the February assassination of former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Harriri to UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. In an earlier report, Meles alleged that high-level Syrians were behind Hariri's murder. He said he will brief the Security Council tomorrow regarding his latest findings.
We are putting in some information, but of course we cannot be too precise on where we are with the investigation because, giving the suspects an idea of what we will do within the weeks to come is really not the way to do an investigation. But of course it will show what we did, where we're heading to, and what we hope to achieve.
In the assassination of pro-Syrian MP Gibran Tueni is certain to feed conspiracy theories swirling around Beirut regarding Syria's role in this and other political assassination. That's the view of Mayor Javadan Far, director of MIPAS, the Middle East Economic and Political Analysis Company.
Certainly the motives for the killing of Mr. Gibran Tueni points us towards the direction of Damascus, because Mr. Gibran Tueni was a legendary anti-Syrian figure in Lebanese politics. He was also, as the editor of the An-Nahar newspaper, he wrote a very famous editorial against Syrian occupation as far back as the year 2000. He has been very active in calls for expulsion of Syrian forces. He's also, before the Cedar Revolution, also during the Melhis reports, he was warned that his name is on an assassination list because he's so active in anti-Syrian fields, and as a reason he left the country, and therefore he's for his own safety. And when he came back within a day, he was assassinated. Now, somebody so anti-Syrian and now and before being assassinated so soon after his return in Lebanon, in the aftermath of the Melhis report, which points the finger at Syria, certainly puts the picture together that Syria may be responsible for this.
At the same time, many people are saying surely Syria would not be so blind or so stupid as to plan this assassination to coincide with the presentation of the Melhis report.
This certainly is food for thought for those who support the conspiracy theories that Syria is not behind all this. Many people say, okay, let's just say in the first place Syria made a massive mistake of assassinating Rafik Hariri. They realized afterwards the international repercussions and isolation that Syria suffered. Would Syria be so blind and ignorant so as to do it again? The answer to that we don't know, but we certainly don't think so, because Hafiz Assad is a man who surrounds himself with very, very intelligent and very professional people in the field of political analysis, especially of Lebanon. But then again, Syria is so isolated and in many ways so politically desperate in the region, so that it wants to eradicate any threats from Lebanese quarters that support the idea that Syria was behind the killing of Hariri. Mr. Tueni was one of those people who blamed Syria time and time again for the death of Hariri, and his removal from the picture certainly removes one element which was supporting the ideas for, supporting the calls for isolation of Syria in the international arena.
Moving to the Iranian nuclear program, and former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Thomas Pickering, said that while Washington still maintains a military option for preventing Tehran from going nuclear, it has learned from Iraq that a military strike on its own does not always produce the wanted results. He was speaking at the Israel Council for International Relations in Tel Aviv.
Since the end of the Iran-Iraq war, it appears that Iran has begun to be heavily engaged in an effort to acquire a nuclear weapons capability. Iran, going back to the days of the Shah, you'll remember, has had an interest in the development of nuclear power. A more conservative new president has been elected in Iran. His public remarks on the nuclear issue, on Israel, and indeed on key international issues are outrageous and probably embarrassing even to the Iranian leadership itself. And while they have shown an interest in talking with the Europeans about nuclear issues, they have become remarkably intransigent about taking any steps that will limit their long-term military nuclear capacity. There seem now to be just a few steps left in the diplomacy. After that, one can see clearly sanctions on the horizon. In addition, the United States has said it has not given up the military option. The central question is whether military force in Iran and North Korea is the answer to the problem. And I think the reason why we are negotiating now is that we feel that may be the answer, but it's not the one that we would choose to involve ourselves in immediately and rapidly. And that even then, military force may have something to say about setting things back. But at the moment, it doesn't alone seem to have solved the problems in Iraq, much less, I think, offer, in a pure military sense, an answer to the issues of nuclearization, either in Iran or North Korea.
A seminar on economic information was opened at Sheraton Oman Hotel today under the auspices of His Excellency Sheikh Abdullah bin Tueni Al Hosni and the Secretary of the Ministry of Information. Further details in the following report by Lakshmi Kathnath.
The two-day Economic Information Seminar is looking at media's role in security market operations, and that is collaboration with the media to bring in the investors. His Excellency Sheikh Abdullah bin Tueni Al Hosni and the Secretary of the Ministry of Information gave the opening speech where he pointed out this role can only achieve success through close cooperation between media organs and the financial markets for the benefit of investors in this vital sector.
I think definitely it is very important because as we are witnessing every day that there are something new in this field and we got to be ready, and I mean we those who work in the field of the media in all sectors in order to be prepared for any developments of any new techniques in the field of the economy. I think having the experts from Asia and Europe in the Sultanate, definitely that will be very beneficial for us in the field of media.
The seminar is held in Muscat as part of the activities of the Information Committee, which is established by the Association of the European and Asian Stock Exchanges, whose current session is chaired by Muscat Securities Market.
Actually, what we are looking for is how we can get the information created in the market to the savers and the investors of the future. And in doing so, of course, how we can get collaboration from the media. This is the main issue that we're concerned here. As you can see from our logo here, this is the Eurasian region that we have been thinking about and how we can ignite the appetite for investing within the region, as well as getting out of the region. People who are outside the region but would like to invest inside the region. So that's what we are after when we have set up this task force to instruct or to convey our ideas to the media people of our region as well as to the outside media people.
Economic information is important for the whole capital market as it brings forth liquidity. Markets need sufficient daily liquidity in order to function with integrity and efficient price discovery. This liquidity in turn comes into the market through the well-informed investors. Under a liquid market, both listed companies and investors achieve their goals and are satisfied. So the two-day conference would not just look at the encouragement of foreign investors from the media's part, but as well as bringing in the domestic investors.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.